Well, it's about time.
I know.
Got one from a lady.
You wanted one.
Why don't we get more from the women?
I don't know. Maybe they're shy.
So this is from, is this from Lynn or Tracy Watson? Do you have a copy of this? There's two names here. Anyway, it says, good morning. I'm a 50-year-old IFBB bikini competitor. My last show was June of this year. It was a seamless prep. I used Anavar/clenbuterol prior to my show, which I've done in the past as well. I recently started taking testosterone propionate due to menopausal symptoms. 80 cc's per week. That can't be right.
No.
Maybe that's 0.8.
Yeah.
But then it says Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Yeah, that could be right. The menopausal symptoms have diminished, but I've gained weight, 5 pounds in 2 weeks to be exact. That's a bit much. My question is, should I be taking testosterone propionate or another form of testosterone? How much? Best regards, Lynn. Then there's a line, Tracy Watson. So maybe it's anyway.
It's a girl.
Great question. Thank you. Yes, thank you for chiming in. The issue may be twofold, or three even. Although this was submitted, when did you get this question?
A few weeks ago.
A few weeks ago. Yeah. So long past June.
Yeah.
Because there's always a bounce back after the show. Just some water, the glycogen going to the muscle, bring some water with. But if it's just been from the propionate, which we can assume, then yeah, it's possible for a couple reasons. One of which you just mentioned in the prior question about conversion into estrogen. So, if she hasn't been using this, and remember the Anavar does not convert to estrogen. So whether you've been using, and it doesn't say here, Anavar to date as hormone replacement therapy, and then also used it for the show in a higher dose or not, or you only used it during the show, you've never seen what regular testosterone can do, one that can convert, in other words, into estrogen, and now you're seeing that. It could be because of the dose for you. It could be that you are converting more than most to estrogen. Again, I'd have to ask more questions, but I can ask them, have you always been estrogenic? Do you tend to carry weight around the hips rather than around the midsection? Is kind of a loose gauge, very loose. But we could see that based upon the numbers. I'm not sure we're going to see that based upon the numbers at 50 years old, but we might have data from earlier lab draws that shows those assays, and we can draw conclusions based on a number of different factors. But it doesn't surprise me how much of that 5 pounds though is muscle versus fat and or water weight. Again, the water weight being secondary to the estrogen increase. Estrogen, particularly excess estrogen, tends to make you hold water. So that's where I'm going with that. But yeah, and again, I said earlier, 5 pounds in 2 weeks, if we assume that it wasn't, the time of day you measured on one versus the other and after eating or something, that'd be a pretty big jump. Of course, she also doesn't say if she's, 120 pounds or 90 pounds or 220 pounds.
Yeah.
So maybe it's not such a big percentage.
Well, bikini. She can't be that big. She's doing bikini.
What's the biggest you could be in bikini?
I don't know.
Well, anyway, you get my point.
Yeah,
I don't mean to make too many assumptions here, but I am risking too much of an assumption here, I guess. Yeah. But anyway, it seems to be too much for her, so let's assume it is too much, right? I don't like to use propionate. There's a legend about propionate and suspension that holds us water. As far as I know, the reason for holding water is excess estrogen. There's also some water that's going to be retained. A little bit of a bump in aldosterone can help you hold some sodium, but it's usually negligible. But it would be the same. What I'm trying to say is it would be the same per person, whatever ester you're using. But again, there's legend that you always want to use a shorter acting testosterone as the show grows near.
Right.
I can't think of anything to support that. As a matter of fact, I could argue against that. When I see big swings in testosterone, like with people who use creams and gels, I see a bigger swing in the dihydrotestosterone and the estrogen because you've got this huge peak and then a trough. Yeah. The body does not like those big swings like that, especially because you're dosing yourself, say for a male 200 milligrams, for a female 20 milligrams in a gel cream form. Well, then you're going outside the range. You've got this big spike outside the range. The farther you get outside that, what we call homeostatic or normal range, the more the body overreacts. So you're going to have more of this excess estrogen, which is going to create more of the water retention that they're trying to avoid, not less of it. So
That's a huge. Every pro I know always do that. Propane right before the show. I'll do it.
And though I will say that there are exceptions, obviously. There are some that swear, look me in the eye, and tell me, Rand, I'm just telling you, man. When I use Cypionate, I can't use Cypionate. It bloats me. I switch to Enanthate, which is 1 carbon different, Dave, okay? And man, the water goes away. Okay, well, I'm not going to argue. And I'm not saying that I don't doubt that one person, but I doubt all of them in an aggregate. You know, there's just too many of them telling me that. And I can't see the physiology behind it.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense to me. 1 carbon difference. And ligand's a little different position. I mean, it's just not going to make that big a difference.
Yeah.
And neither would propionate. Although there are some that I got to believe it must, whatever the mechanism is, it does make a difference to them. Something we haven't studied yet or don't know about, I don't know. But again, in aggregate, no, not that many. Some of it's just placebo or made up or just something else is going on that we don't know yet.
Yeah.
So to get to the question that she asked here, I recommend Cypionate. Why? Other than undecanoate, which is, as of, I want to say 2 years ago now, been introduced in the United States, it's the longest acting ester available to us. It's just a pain in the rear to get a hold of. I had a fellow fly all the way from Texas because I would prescribe it for him instead of his Cypionate, I think it was. And we went through all the hoops I can go through, and it was impossible to get.
To get that guy?
No, I'm sorry. Undecanoate,
okay.
Testosterone undecanoate. It's it's the longest lasting ester that I'm aware of.
I see.
That we can get testosterone.
Okay.
They made too many rules to get it, such that good luck finding a source for it.
Oh, gotcha.
None of our compounders will do it, and go to a Rite Aid, Eckerd's, CVS, Save-On, whatever it is. You can't find it because it's just they created too much of a headache to get it done, and they have this disclaimer that you have a higher chance of embolism. Well, why would that ester make any difference than the others? I mean, and so that scares away doctors, I think. And so anyway, Cypionate is the longest lasting practical ester available in the United States. It has, depending on what study you read, an 8-day half-life as opposed to Enanthate, depending on what study you read, a 7-day half-life. Used to be I'd recommend Cypionate just because it was way cheaper than Enanthate, and that one, I mean, on top of everything else, but they're all pretty similar now in terms of cost, although propionate ends up costing more money. Cypionate and Enanthate, I think, are about the same in terms of cost, and it's again 1 day difference doesn't make that much difference.
Yeah.
But and the way they made Enanthate back then used to whatever excipient they were using, or whether the sodium benzoate or benzoyl alcohol, whatever it was, tended to hurt more, like propionate does.
Stings.
Yeah, it stings when you put the propionate in. So again, all avenues lead to my answer being I would recommend Cypionate. It's just easier. And once a week tends to work just fine for females too, just like with males. You don't have to divide the dose necessarily. I want to make sure I answered her as best I can because we finally got a female question here. Did I miss anything?
No.
Oh, and how much? So I think I said earlier, you can get 20 milligram per ml compounded or 50 milligram per ml compounded, and I recommend 20 milligrams per week, 1 ml of the 20 meg or 0.4 mLs of the 50 milligram, and that tends to put females in the sweet spot for the week. Now you're going to have the same peaks and troughs in titer during the week, but the average is going to be a free T somewhere around maybe 3.8 to 4.2, depending on the individual. But I'm saying average, and at the top of the range of so-called normal. But optimum is what I found. That usually works pretty well. We've talked about this before, though. I hope with females, what's interesting about replacement therapy is to get that free testosterone to that sweet spot of, we'll call it somewhere around 4 picograms per milliliter. You're going to see a total T that's going to send a primary care physician not familiar with this through the roof. And just some observers, patients in other words, that are going, oh my God, what's going on there, Rand? They'll see, the top of the range, depending on the the laboratory is somewhere around, we'll call it 48 nanograms per deciliter. You'll have to get to at least 3 times that upper limit of normal, at least, to get to a free T of the upper limit of normal. Or again, about 4 picograms per milliliter. That scares a lot of people, and we don't know why that is. And so sometimes you'll see a total, depending upon when they do their last injection, which with cypionate, on average, will be about 2.5 days after your injection, you'll see a peak, and you might see a 250 nanograms per milliliter. And, the doc or the female is going, "Oh my God, what's going on here?" Hold on. First of all, that's the peak.
Yeah.
But and then the same thing applies for females as for males. The therapeutic level is what you're shooting to get above. It doesn't really matter how far you go above in replacement level terms. I'm not talking about crazy, using a male dose for a female. I'm talking about just, you're going to have that time period, that peak that goes a little bit wonky, if you will, for most eyes that haven't seen it before, where you're going, 3, 4, 5 times the upper limit of normal for the total. But the free might bump a little bit above, but for the week, just like with males, the average will be at that sweet spot or above that therapeutic target. And that's what you want to do. As I said with males too, I think I've said this before, you're not necessarily looking for a sweet spot like you would with thyroid, where it's got to be above too low and it's got to be below too much. With testosterone replacement therapy, it's got to be above that therapeutic level or not. It won't work, in other words.
Right.
So with females, and to set the record straight when it comes to free T, which is a better gauge to use than total T, which I used earlier for the example from back in the 1950s, 800 nanograms per deciliter for males. For females, you're probably talking about a minimum of 150 nanograms per deciliter of total T, which again freaks people out. Don't. But a free T, you're shooting for about 4. And for males, just because we didn't mention it before, 28 to 32. Just again, these are just numbers, but that's usually equilibrates to clinical benefit. So
Gotcha.
did I get everything in there for the females?
I think so.
All right. More female questions.
I think I'm gonna use that one first. All right.